Before we begin, quick pause because stories like this survive on signal, not silence. If you enjoy HFY tales where humanity does the impossible by doing the unthinkable, tap like, subscribe for more weekly sci-fi, and tell me in the comments what you think would scare the Galactic Council more. A superweapon, or a human with no fear? Now let's begin. The Galactic Council chamber had been designed to withstand supernovas, temporal fractures, and the collective outrage of 17 advanced civilizations. It had not been designed to hold fear. Fear seeped into the room anyway, clinging to the vaulted walls and the hovering sigils of authority, pooling around the central containment dais where the apex predator lay restrained. It was enormous, even subdued. Its armored hide reflected the chamber's light in dull oil-dark patterns, and each slow rise of its chest caused the restraint fields to shimmer under the strain. The creature's eyes were open. They always were. The council found that detail deeply unsettling. Every species in the chamber had a name for it. None of those names were spoken aloud anymore. Naming implied familiarity, and familiarity implied the possibility of misunderstanding. The official designation, repeated in sterile reports and trembling briefings, was simply Apex Predator Class Entity 1. A title that carried the weight of extinct fleets and burned worlds. Counselor Threx of the Caliph clicked his mandibles together in agitation, the sound sharp enough to cut through the low murmur of translators. "We are wasting time," he said. "Every moment it remains alive increases the probability of catastrophe." Several delegates signaled agreement. Others remained silent, their species having learned that loud opinions tended to draw the predator's attention, even through layers of shielding. At the far edge of the chamber stood Elias Ward, hands folded behind his back, posture relaxed to the point of impropriety. He wore no ceremonial armor, no bioluminescent insignia of rank. Just a simple dark uniform bearing the mark of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. To most of the council he looked fragile, soft. A strange choice for a species that claimed to have survived its own predators. Elias did not look at the council while they argued. His gaze never left the creature. Up close he could see what the scans had failed to capture. The apex predator was not thrashing. Not struggling. Its muscles were coiled, yes, but not in panic. Its tail lay still. Its claws were retracted. These were not the signs of a cornered animal. They were the signs of restraint chosen, not imposed. He felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the same sensation he'd felt years ago on Earth when he'd stood between a wounded mountain predator and a line of nervous soldiers who wanted a clean solution to a complicated problem. Back then, fear had spoken louder than understanding. The scars on his left arm were a reminder of what happened when fear was obeyed too quickly. "The human has not spoken," Counselor Vree of the Silicate Choir observed, her voice resonating like chimes through stone. "Is he even aware of the danger?" Elias smiled faintly, though no one noticed. He was very aware. The central conflict of the chamber crystallized in that moment, though none of the delegates named it correctly. They believed the question before them was whether the predator should be destroyed, studied, or weaponized. Elias understood that the real question was simpler and far more dangerous. Was the galaxy capable of seeing a monster as something other than a threat? The apex predator's gaze shifted, just slightly. One massive eye rotated, locking onto Elias with unsettling precision. The council gasped as a single organism, weapon systems priming instinctively. Energy signatures spiked. The restraint fields flared brighter. Elias did not move. He felt it then, the weight of attention, not like pressure but like being measured. Not judged. Measured. His pulse slowed instead of racing, an old training reflex kicking in. Breathe slow. Shoulders loose. Hands visible. Don't stare like prey, don't glare like a challenger. The predator's eye narrowed, a movement so subtle that half the chamber missed it. Elias did not. "That reaction," he said calmly, breaking his silence at last, "is not aggression." Every translator focused on him instantly. Counselor Threx turned, mandibles flaring. "You presume to lecture us, human, on a being that has slaughtered entire biospheres?" "I presume," Elias replied, voice steady, "to point out that if it wanted us dead, we wouldn't be having this conversation." The words landed harder than any shouted accusation. The chamber quieted, the kind of quiet that followed an uncomfortable truth. Elias took a step forward, just one. The automated defense grid tracked him immediately, targeting reticles ghosting across his chest. He ignored them. "I've read your histories," he continued. "Every encounter you've had with this species began with weapons. With fleets. With fear." He gestured toward the restrained giant. "You never tried anything else." Counselor Vree's crystalline form pulsed. "And you propose what, exactly?" "Kindness." Elias looked at the predator again. Up close he could see old scars beneath the armor plates. He could see the tension in its jaw, the way it held itself ready for pain, not escape. Something in his chest ached at the familiarity of it. "I propose," he said quietly, "that we stop proving its worst assumptions correct." The apex predator exhaled, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the chamber floor. The sensors registered it as harmless atmospheric displacement. Elias heard something else in it. Not a threat. Not a challenge. Waiting. Around them, the council hesitated, caught between doctrine and doubt. For the first time since the creature's capture, no one gave an order. Elias took another step forward, unaware that in doing so, he had just placed the fate of the galaxy on the line. Elias felt the shift in the chamber before any alarm acknowledged it. The air itself seemed to tighten, as though the station were holding its breath along with the council. His second step had crossed an invisible boundary, not marked on any floor plan but deeply etched into the instincts of every non-human present. The predator's gaze followed him now without restraint. Up close, the scale of it defied distance. Its presence bent perception, making Elias acutely aware of his own fragility. He did not mistake that awareness for fear. Fear demanded retreat. This demanded respect. Behind him, Counselor Threx hissed a sharp command, and the restraint fields intensified, their glow brightening until the apex predator's armor reflected fractured light across the chamber. The creature stiffened, a low vibration rolling through its massive frame. Not pain, Elias realized, but readiness, the kind born of long experience with betrayal. "Reduce field intensity," Elias said, not raising his voice. Silence answered him. Then incredulous murmurs rippled through the delegates. "That is not a request you are authorized to make," Counselor Vree said, her tone carrying both caution and curiosity. Elias did not turn around. He had learned long ago that some moments collapsed if broken by unnecessary movement. "I know," he replied. "But if you don't, you'll learn something today. And I don't think you'll like what that lesson costs." The predator's eye flicked toward the restrained emitters, then back to Elias. A calculation passed through that ancient gaze. Elias felt it settle on him like a weight. He became acutely conscious of his breathing, of the way his hands hung loose at his sides. Open. Unarmed. The memory surfaced unbidden. A rain-soaked forest on Earth. The sound of panicked shouts behind him. A wounded animal cornered by men who did not understand that survival could look like savagery from the outside. He remembered stepping forward then too, heart pounding, trusting a fragile bridge built from patience and nerve. That bridge had held. Barely. "Elias Ward," Counselor Threx snapped, using his full designation like a weapon. "You are placing yourself between the Council and an existential threat." Elias finally glanced back, meeting the alien's multifaceted eyes. "No," he said. "I'm standing beside it." The distinction mattered more than it sounded. A pause followed, stretched thin by indecision. Then, reluctantly, the restraint fields dimmed by a fraction. The apex predator exhaled again, deeper this time, the vibration resonating through Elias's boots. He felt it travel up his bones, a physical acknowledgement. The creature shifted. One massive forelimb moved, slow enough to be deliberate, claws remaining sheathed. The council erupted in alarm, weapon systems flaring to life. "Hold," Elias said sharply now. The word cut through the chaos, not because of volume but because of certainty. He had spent years cultivating that tone, the one that assumed compliance without demanding it. The predator's limbs settled against the containment floor. It did not advance. It did not retreat. It waited. Elias took another step, then stopped, now close enough to see the fine scars webbing the joints beneath the armor. This was not a being unfamiliar with restraint or pain. This was a survivor of repeated attempts at erasure. "They hurt you," Elias murmured, not for the council's benefit. The translators hesitated, uncertain whether the words were meant to be broadcast. The predator's eye widened slightly, focusing with renewed intensity. The sound it made then was not the deep exhale from before but something softer, a low, resonant rumble that stirred the air. Counselor Vree's crystalline facets dimmed in confusion. "It is responding." Elias nodded, though his eyes never left the creature. "Because it knows I'm not here to take something from it." A flicker of movement from the predator's head drew a collective gasp. Its massive form leaned forward, bringing its armored face closer to the weakening field. Elias felt the heat radiating from it, the sheer vitality of a being that had outlived empires. Every instinct he possessed urged caution, but none urged retreat. He raised his hand slowly, palm open, stopping well short of the containment boundary. A universal gesture older than language. I am here. I mean no harm. The predator leaned closer until only the shimmering field separated them. Its breath fogged the barrier. The eye nearest Elias softened, its lid lowering not in aggression but in focus. For a heartbeat that seemed to stretch beyond time, predator and human regarded one another. Then the apex predator did something no council record had ever predicted. It lowered its head. Not in submission. Not in defeat. But in an offering of proximity, a calculated risk mirrored by Elias's own. The chamber fell into stunned silence, the kind that precedes either revelation or disaster. Elias felt a quiet certainty settle into place. Whatever happened next would redefine every assumption the galaxy held about fear, power, and the creatures it chose to call monsters. And for the first time since stepping forward, he allowed himself the smallest hint of a smile, because the hardest part was over. The real conversation was about to begin. The chamber seemed to exhale as Elias stepped closer, each footfall measured, deliberate. The apex predator followed with eyes like molten steel, muscles coiled beneath segmented armor that had survived wars older than most council records. For a creature built to destroy, it was astonishingly still, astonishingly patient. Elias felt the gravity of that patience pressing against him, testing his composure, weighing the cost of every movement. The council erupted in murmurs again, weapons systems arcing to life with lethal precision. Energy reticles danced across the floor, scanning for the slightest provocation. Elias raised both hands slowly, palms open and visible, a gesture not of command but of trust. It was a gesture so alien to the council that many froze in disbelief, unable to interpret intent without a weaponized framework. "You are risking your life," Counselor Threx hissed, mandibles clattering. "Every step you take could provoke it into obliteration." "I am aware," Elias replied evenly. "And I accept that risk." His voice carried a calm that cut through panic like a blade. He had spoken words like these before when dealing with Earth's apex predators, but never on this scale. The stakes now were entire star systems, civilizations teetering on the edge of hysteria, all misunderstanding what true control meant. The predator's massive head shifted, armored plates grinding softly. Its deep, resonant growl vibrated through the chamber, yet it was not aggression. Elias recognized the sound from years of reading animals' subtle cues, a measured acknowledgement, an inquiry. It was asking a question and he intended to answer it in kind. "I'm not here to fight you," he said softly, stepping within arm's reach of the containment field. The energy barriers flared in response, registering the proximity. Elias did not flinch. "I'm here to understand." A collective gasp ran through the council. Their interpretation was immediate and instinctual. The human was foolish, reckless, suicidal. Elias felt the weight of their assumptions but did not allow them to dictate his actions. He had learned that true communication required risk, vulnerability, and clarity. The predator's eye locked onto his, vast and ancient, and Elias held the gaze. Slowly, deliberately, he extended a hand toward the shimmer of the containment field. Not a strike, not a command. Just a hand. A simple, universal act of connection. The apex predator's eye narrowed, scrutinizing, calculating. For the first time, the chamber was completely silent. Even the hum of the station's system seemed to pause. Then the predator leaned forward, testing the field with the weight of its armored head. A ripple of tension traveled through the containment lines. Sensors screamed warnings, but the creature remained poised, measuring the human's intent. Elias did not withdraw. He let his hand hover, steady, unwavering. He remembered a phrase from his childhood back on Earth. "Courage is not the absence of fear but the decision that something else is more important." Here, fear was the constant. Life, understanding, and connection were the variables he chose to weigh more heavily. He flexed his fingers slightly, a tentative invitation. The apex predator exhaled, a sound that shook the floor but carried no malice. Elias felt it as much as heard it. The energy fields flickered as if acknowledging the shift. Then the impossible happened. The creature lowered its head against the shimmering barrier, resting the massive weight of its armored skull just short of contact. Elias's pulse quickened, not in fear but in recognition. He had dealt with dangerous creatures before, but nothing of this scale, nothing with such sentience. The moment felt sacred, precarious. One misstep, one sudden movement, and everything could unravel. Yet in that stillness, something extraordinary took place. The predator made a choice. It could have struck. It could have destroyed. Instead, it offered proximity. He exhaled slowly, synchronizing his rhythm with the creature's measured breathing. I see you, he whispered. Not as prey, not as a weapon, but as a being. I understand that you've been hunted, restrained, and feared. None of that changes what you are capable of, but it does matter what you choose next. The room remained tense, filled with a static dread that only the council could generate. Weapons hovered, poised. Delegates whispered warnings, some praying for an immediate display of control, others frozen in disbelief. None of them comprehended what Elias had recognized. The predator was not just observing him, it was judging him, the human, and every assumption the council had made about interaction, power, and fear. Another step forward. Elias's hand brushed the containment barrier, fingertips grazing the shimmering field. The predator's eye flicked down to the contact, then back to him. There was curiosity there now, a quiet interrogation that transcended language. Elias could feel the shift in its awareness, a tentative willingness to respond to presence rather than coercion. The council's murmurs intensified. It's engaging with him, one delegate whispered. It's responding, voluntarily. Yes, Elias said softly, more to himself than anyone else. Because it knows I am not a threat. I'm not trying to dominate it. I'm only reaching out. A low vibration coursed through the floor, and the predator leaned closer, resting its armored head fully against the barrier. Elias could feel the heat, the immense energy contained in a creature that had survived millennia. Its gaze remained fixed, calculating, testing boundaries. Elias did not flinch. He closed the distance between intention and gesture. The room held its collective breath. Every weapon system, every sensor, every delegate in the chamber waited for the inevitable explosion of violence. But it did not come. Instead, the apex predator exhaled again, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to hum through the very bones of the station. Elias's hand remained steady, hovering just above the barrier. The creature had made its decision. It would not attack. Not now. Perhaps not ever. It had acknowledged the human on terms of its own choosing. The moment crystallized in the minds of all present. This was no taming. This was no submission. This was communication. A being of unmeasured power had recognized intent, and it had chosen to respond not with claws or teeth, but with stillness and focus. Elias's lips curved into the faintest smile. He knew that this fragile equilibrium could not last indefinitely. The council would act, the predator would react, and the boundaries of safety were tenuous at best. Yet for now there was a bridge, a tenuous, unprecedented bridge, between human and apex predator, built not with fear or domination, but with understanding and trust. And in that chamber, suspended between tension and possibility, one truth became unmistakable. The galaxy had never seen anything like this. The real confrontation was only beginning, but Elias had already gained the most important advantage. He had been seen. And for the first time in its long violent history, the predator had chosen to see back. Elias felt the weight of the predator's attention as if it were gravity itself. Every movement of its massive frame, every subtle shift in the armored ridges along its spine, was a message, a question posed without words. He understood instinctively that this was not a creature accustomed to being read. It had survived millennia of war, of betrayal, of hunters who assumed that fear was the only language that mattered. And now, in the rare quiet of understanding, it was measuring him, not as prey, not as conqueror, but as potential kin. The council's murmurs had become frantic whispers. Delegates pointed at their monitors, scrutinizing energy readings, muttering theories of containment failure or hidden aggression. To them, the predator's stillness was incomprehensible. It was unnatural, unquantifiable. Elias did not look at the monitors. He looked at the creature, and he began to speak softly, deliberately, bridging gaps no translator could interpret. "You've been hunted," he said, his voice steady. "You've been restrained, prodded, studied. And yet here you are." He paused, letting the words settle, feeling the vibration of the predator's deep, resonant exhalation in his chest. "None of that has defined you. Only what you choose defines you." For a moment, the chamber seemed to freeze in shared disbelief. The predator tilted its head, the motion so subtle it could have been missed entirely if not for the human's unwavering attention. That tilt was acknowledgement, a signal Elias had learned to read long ago when dealing with the wild beasts of his home planet. This being, the apex of galactic predators, was listening. Not because it had to, but because it wanted to. The thought was astonishing. Elias felt a pulse of understanding. The predator was not tamed. It was not subjugated. It had not surrendered. It had chosen to trust, and that choice alone carried more weight than any fleet, any weapon, any protocol the council could muster. "You do not need to fear me," Elias continued, letting his words drift in the space between them. "I am not your enemy. I do not seek to control you. I only seek to understand." The pause was intentional. Understanding was a language few had ever attempted to speak to this creature, and none had succeeded. Until now. The apex predator lowered itself slightly, its massive head resting closer to the energy barrier, as if to indicate comprehension. Elias could sense the tension in its muscles, the careful calculation in each movement. It was as if it were weighing every instinct it had honed over eons against the unfamiliar, disarming approach of a human who refused to conform to fear. Counselor Threx barked an order and weapon systems flared, drones adjusting positions. Elias did not react with alarm. He had anticipated resistance. Instead he spoke again, firm but calm. "Do not act out of assumption. It is not aggression that governs this moment but choice. And choice is yours, not theirs." The predator's tail shifted slightly, sweeping across the containment floor with a deliberate slowness. Elias recognized the motion as a signal of attention, the same subtle cue that predators on his homeworld used to indicate engagement without provocation. It was deliberate. It was controlled. It was understanding. Elias stepped closer, careful to remain within the unbroken field of the containment barrier. His hand hovered near the shimmering energy, not to strike, not to touch, only to offer the universal gesture of intent. The predator's gaze followed, unblinking. Its enormous eye reflected intelligence that had survived millennia of calculated survival, and now, for the first time, that intelligence considered a human on equal footing. "You remember every attack, every betrayal, every fleet that came to destroy you," Elias said softly. "But none of that dictates who you must be now. That choice belongs to you." The apex predator exhaled, a deep rumble that vibrated through the chamber and into Elias's chest. He felt the sound as much as he heard it, a tactile acknowledgement that the creature was absorbing the meaning of his words. For the first time, Elias perceived something deeper beneath the predator's surface, something the council could never comprehend: memory and judgment intertwined with patience. It had survived by calculating trust and betrayal in equal measure, by learning that aggression was only one option among many. And now it was testing an entirely new variable: alliance. "You do not have to submit," Elias continued, letting each word anchor the fragile connection. "You only have to recognize that not all who approach you seek to destroy. That understanding is rare. That understanding is power." The apex predator's massive head shifted slightly closer, armored plates grinding faintly but not threateningly. Its eye, vast and liquid in depth, studied him, tracing every subtle motion, every micro-expression. It was learning, evaluating. Elias did not flinch. He had learned, in a lifetime of working with creatures of all sizes and ferocity, that patience was as potent as any weapon. The council erupted into anxious murmurs again. "It is engaging voluntarily," one delegate whispered, voice trembling. Another delegate's comms died in a burst of static, as though the very station recognized the unprecedented nature of what was unfolding. Elias's lips curved into a small, controlled smile. This was no victory, no triumph. This was negotiation without coercion, communion without compromise. It was the most dangerous form of trust any being could offer, and the most fragile. The predator made another subtle motion, a deliberate lowering of its head, closer but not crossing the invisible barrier. Elias felt the vibration through the floorboards, the raw, restrained power that could obliterate any ship in moments if unleashed. Yet here it was, holding back, evaluating, considering. It had chosen restraint, guided not by fear but by calculation, curiosity, and perhaps a nascent respect. Elias's gaze met its eye again, steady and unyielding. "I see you," he said, voice soft yet carrying an authority that needed no weapons. "I see who you are and who you could be. And I am here not as a threat, but as someone who understands." The apex predator rumbled again, a sound of recognition. Not surrender. Not submission. Recognition. The distinction was critical. Elias felt it as clearly as if the creature had spoken. It had acknowledged him. It had chosen to interact on terms it understood and respected, and in doing so, it had made a decision that would reverberate far beyond the confines of this chamber. Around them, the council had no frame of reference. Their theories, their protocols, their weapons were irrelevant. Elias and the predator existed in a space defined only by choice and comprehension. And in that space, the human had won nothing yet gained everything. The first thread of connection with a being that had never allowed connection. Elias exhaled, a quiet release that mirrored the predator's rumble. The moment was fleeting, delicate, yet undeniable. Whatever consequences awaited, whatever challenges remained, one immutable truth had been established. The apex predator could choose, and it had chosen to respond. The chamber held its breath as the two beings regarded one another, a silent understanding forming between predator and human, an unspoken alliance waiting to be tested. And in that stillness, Elias knew that the galaxy's rules were about to be rewritten, starting with the one truth that had always eluded every civilization. Fear was not the only language of power. He allowed himself the faintest smile. The real journey was only beginning. The chamber was suspended in a rare stillness, the kind that follows a revelation yet precedes consequence. Elias felt the apex predator's gaze remain locked on him, immense and calculating, a presence so overwhelming that every breath seemed to carry the weight of ancient wars. For a long moment nothing moved. The council hesitated, unsure whether to act, to intervene, or to flee. Every delegate's training, every precaution, every fleet that had ever faced the predator's wrath counted for nothing against what was happening here. Trust. Elias stepped closer, cautious but unflinching. The predator lowered its massive head further, not in submission but in recognition. Its armor plates shifted with a low, resonant grind that filled the room like a heartbeat. Elias extended his hand, brushing against the containment field. The energy shimmered, then stabilized as though acknowledging the contact. The predator's eye followed, unblinking, assessing every micro-movement, every flicker of intention. "You can leave the fear behind," Elias said, his voice steady, carrying a calm authority forged in years of confronting Earth's most dangerous creatures. "You have survived because you were cautious, calculated, and fierce. But you can survive differently now. You can choose to act not because you must, but because you decide to." The apex predator exhaled, a deep vibration that reverberated through the floor and into Elias's chest. The sound was not menace, it was deliberation. Around them, the council erupted in anxious whispers, some frantically signaling orders, others frozen in disbelief. No one understood the language being spoken, yet all felt the gravity. This was not domination, nor was it submission. It was understanding, a recognition that the galaxy had never witnessed. Elias stepped forward, close enough that the shimmering energy fields no longer seemed a barrier but a threshold. He let his hand hover just above the predator's armored skull, fingers brushing the warm metal as if testing it for weight, for intent. The predator leaned in slightly, a subtle motion that conveyed curiosity and acceptance, acknowledging the human without yielding authority. The gesture, so simple yet profound, spoke volumes. Two beings capable of unimaginable destruction had chosen connection over conflict. Counselor Threx bellowed, a sound meant to assert command, but Elias did not flinch. "Do not act," he said firmly, not to the predator but to the council. "You do not control this. You never have." His eyes met the counselor's, unwavering. "And if you try to enforce control, the consequences will fall on you, not us." The predator rumbled low, a sound that trembled through the very walls of the chamber. It shifted its weight, testing boundaries but not breaking them, each movement deliberate, a signal that it was taking measure of the situation. Elias felt the resonance in his bones, the raw power contained within a creature that had survived empires, yet chose restraint now. That choice, he realized, was more formidable than any weapon. Elias's gaze softened. He spoke again, quieter this time, meant only for the predator. "I'm not your master. I'm not here to command. I am here to witness, to understand, and to stand beside you." The predator's massive eye, reflecting the chamber's lights like liquid metal, lingered on him. A subtle exhalation escaped its jaws, almost imperceptible, a gesture of acceptance. Around them, the council's anxiety reached a crescendo. Delegates gestured wildly, weapon systems hummed in readiness, and emergency protocols blared warnings. Yet the predator remained still, choosing not to act. Elias sensed a profound intelligence at work, a recognition that the human offered no threat and no weakness, only presence and intent. The predator had evaluated, and it had chosen allegiance, an allegiance of its own making. Elias's hand finally met the shimmering field fully. The predator leaned forward, nudging the barrier just enough that a faint shimmer of light ran across its armored scales. The chamber's monitors recorded every fluctuation, every minute shift in energy, but none could interpret the significance. Only Elias understood what was happening. The predator was not bound by chains, not tamed by fear, but engaged in deliberate choice. Its decision would alter the galaxy's perception of power, authority, and humanity forever. "You are free," Elias whispered almost reverently. "Free to act as you will and to choose what kind of force you are." The Predator's eye narrowed slightly, then widened as if acknowledging the gravity of the words. Then, slowly, deliberately, it shifted its massive frame, testing the containment lines. Nothing broke. Nothing snapped. It had learned a new rhythm, a balance between power and intention, guided by comprehension rather than instinct. The Council panicked. Fleets had been dispatched in anticipation of chaos, but the Predator ignored every protocol, every weapon, every demand. Elias realized, with a thrill that ran cold through his spine, that control had shifted permanently. Humanity, small and underestimated, had earned an ally the galaxy had feared above all else. Not by subjugation, not by force, but by trust. Elias stepped fully forward, hand resting lightly against the shimmering field. The Predator lowered its armored head to his level, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from its body, the subtle pulse of energy restrained but immense. For the first time in millennia, the Predator had chosen to stand beside another being willingly, and the choice carried consequences beyond imagination. The chamber held its breath as the two figures remained, human and apex predator, a union of respect and understanding forged in defiance of fear. The galaxy would not comprehend this moment easily. Delegates would scramble to rewrite histories, fleets would be reassigned, and whispers would ripple through every system. Yet Elias felt no triumph, only the steady pulse of certainty. They had survived by choice, not by instinct. Then, as if responding to an unspoken signal, the Predator shifted again, nudging the containment barrier to its limits. Alarms screamed, and yet it did not attack. Elias smiled faintly, sensing the final, critical message. Power did not demand domination, and fear did not command loyalty. The Predator had chosen him, not out of necessity but out of recognition, and in that choice lay a force that would reshape the galaxy. With a deliberate motion, the Predator stepped fully into the chamber, moving as one with Elias, an impossible alliance in motion. The Council's voices rose in panic and disbelief, but Elias did not flinch. His hand rested lightly against the creature's scaled shoulder, and together they turned toward the chamber doors, toward freedom, and toward a future where humanity would be reckoned with not for weapons or numbers, but for courage, understanding, and the ability to see monsters as more than threats. The chamber erupted in a final, stunned silence. Weapons deactivated themselves in hesitation, protocols faltered, and the galaxy's most feared predator walked not to destroy, but to protect. Elias, standing beside it, understood that the true apex force in the universe was not strength, nor fleet, nor firepower. It was choice. And in that moment humanity had claimed it.